Your Partner in Success Radio is a free business podcast with host Denise Griffitts. It's all about great stories, conversation, and context to help you move your business and life forward with actionable tips and advice from her guest experts. To listen and subscribe, just find us on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you consume your podcasts.
Good morning and welcome to Your Partner in Success Radio. I am your host, Denise Griffitts, and I'm thrilled to have you join us today and every week. This podcast is ranked in the top 2% of the most popular podcasts globally. And honestly, it's my guests. It's nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with my truly incredible guests. And today we have a very special guest, in my opinion, because he's talking about things that I'm curious about, and I know you are too. And my guest is Marc Mawhinney. He is a leading coaching expert and the host of the popular podcast, Natural Born Coaches. I've listened. It's great. And Marc is here to share his invaluable insights, on starting a successful business on a shoestring budget. Now you get why I'm so excited. And we're talking about his 3-pillar strategy. Hang on a second. Cold, but I'm thinking I might be starting one. So I don't want to cough on you. So in this conversation, we're going to dive deep into how you can build your online coaching business without relying on fancy funnels or expensive ads. And Marc is going to reveal his proven strategies for increasing your fees and charging what you're worth. And that's such a big deal for all of us, whether we're coaches, mentors, podcast hosts, web developers, whatever service we're providing. We tend to get stuck on what are we really worth and what's it worth to them. And we're going to talk about that. And he's going to help us overcome adversity and navigate the challenges that come with starting out. And this is important. With over 3,000 days of daily emails under his belt, Marc will also share how consistent communication can turn your email list into a cash register. Love that. Plus, we're going to explore why being polarizing, yeah, that's what I said, polarizing in your messaging can be a game changer for your business. Marc, good morning. Welcome to Your Partner in Success Radio. It's good to have you here.
Thank you for having me, Denise.
Bless you. I had to reschedule you earlier this week. And here you are. Thank you. Because that's always difficult to do, as busy as you are, as busy as I am. And I mean, you didn't have any problem with it all. You said, sure. I went, oh, good. I was so worried about it.
Well, as a podcast host, I've been on your side of the microphone before, so I understand where you're coming from. And yes, I try to be understanding for sure.
That moment of panic, I said, oh, geez, he's going to hate me. He's never coming. We all do that.
I was throwing darts at a picture of your face the last few days, but I got over it. I'm good now.
Yeah, hard to do. There's no pictures of me on the internet, but I get where you're going. Well, listen, before we get started with your 3-pillar strategy, which I'm fascinated by, can you share with your audience a bit about you and how you like to show up in the world?
Well, boys, it's always tricky to try to condense your whole life story into 30 seconds. So well, the broad strokes are I've been in the coaching world since 2014. So I celebrated my 10-year mark earlier this year. And my whole business is helping coaches get more clients organically and without paid ads. Before that, I had a life in real estate, and I did that for about a decade, built up a big company, and then everything collapsed after that decade. And that's how I got into coaching. I was helped by several coaches and mentors to get back on my feet, and that's what led me into this world.
I've always believed we have to have coaches and mentors. You can't do it on your own. As much as we like to think, oh, I'm tough, I'm strong, I got this. And I'll say this to myself daily, I got this, I got this. And then I hear myself saying, I don't got this. I really don't.
Yeah. I always say you could be the most motivated, disciplined person in the world. And, we're too close to the action, right? It's difficult to see the forest for the trees. And it does take someone who has a little bit of distance and isn't as emotionally invested in your success or failure, I guess, to point out some things that you may have missed. So I do think coaches are great for pointing out blind spots and I think it was Michael Neal talked about, maybe in Super Coach or one of those books, the lamppost theory, where people can get benefit from just talking to a lamppost, about what's on their mind and their goals and their hopes and their visions. So if a lamppost has that much power, imagine what someone like you or me or any coach can have with a person.
I had a coach very early on, and she listened to me. I think I was whining. I know I was. I was whining. And she just very quietly said, Denise, what are you tolerating? I couldn't
Mm.
even talk for a while. I mean, it took me several days to digest that. And when I figured it out, I said, I'm not doing that again.
Yes. Well, I heard a coach the other day and he said a couple times in the conversation that no one's buying programs or spending money online, and I'm like, well, that's the coaching industry has changed, I think, the last few years. Maybe you have to put a bit more work in or send some more emails or do more posts and things like that. But to say nobody's spending money online is a really silly statement. And I pointed that out to him, like, hey, you got to be careful saying things like that, because you're imprinting on your subconscious that that's true, and it's not true. I said, have you bought anything in the personal development space here this year? And he started listing off different programs he was buying and stuff like that. And I said, see there, you just disproved it right there.
That because it's clearly not true. It's the best way, I think. I mean, when I'm speaking with a coach or a mentor, excuse me, I like to do it one-on-one. I like to actually have the conversation, but there's all this ancillary information that comes from having a course or a do-it-yourself type of a thing. I mean, we need those other pieces. So I can't agree with him at all.
No, we're on the same page for sure. So, or if you hear people say things like webinars are dead or emails are dead, whatever, it's like, no, there's people who are making those things work. Now, you might have to tweak some things here. Sorry, my ring light it chose to fall off my desk at that exact moment. But yeah, so you have to be careful with the words that you speak.
Well, let's go ahead and talk because I've got a ton of questions for you. Talk to us about your three pillar strategy and how it can help coaches, honestly, and anybody else start their
Hmm.
businesses on a limited budget. And I think that's what people right now, and really honestly, if they're just starting out, you almost always have a limited budget as far as I can tell. But right now, with the state of our economy, people are scaling back. So limited budget, that got my attention. I went, okay, let's talk. I like that.
Yeah. So the challenge with building an online business, I mean, this is probably true for bricks and mortar businesses as well, but there are so many different avenues you can go to get in front of potential clients. There's, thousands of ways that you could do it. And what the three pillar strategy, what I mean by that is a pillar is a method of getting your name, your message, your offer in front of people who could pay you, for what you do. And it's all about identifying three ways you're going to connect with your target market. So it doesn't mean that you can't do more things. But for example, my three pillars, and yours could be different, Denise, although I know we at least have one pillar that's in common, because podcasting is one of my pillars. Now, that means me hosting a show for natural born coaches, but also going out on shows like I'm doing right now. So podcasting is one of my pillars. Community building. So I have the Coaching Jungle Facebook group. We're over 26,000 coaches now, and growing every day. And so community building, but maybe your community's elsewhere. If your people aren't on Facebook, don't build your community in Facebook, go elsewhere. And then my third pillar is email marketing. And as you mentioned earlier, specifically daily emails to my list, which I've been sending since April of 2016 and haven't missed a day since then. So you might be thinking, well, okay, I like podcasting and I want to build a community, but I hate emails. Okay, well, that's fine. Maybe YouTube is your third pillar. It doesn't mean I'm not doing other things. I'm on LinkedIn and I'm on different places, but it means that 90% of what I'm focusing on is on those three pillars. And what's really good about it is it keeps your horse blinders on, because there will be shiny objects that are going to appear by anywhere out of left field. And just in the last couple of years, for example, a few years back, everyone was telling me that I had to be on Clubhouse. Oh my gosh, you got to be on Clubhouse. It's the next big thing. It's huge. And if you're not on there, your business is going to die, blah, blah, blah. I said, no, I'm not interested in it. I checked it out very briefly. I didn't like it. I'm like, no, I'm not going to move that in as one of my pillars. Last summer, Threads was the new one, the hot new thing. And everybody's gushing, oh my gosh, it's like Twitter, but it's happier place. It's this utopia and stuff. And I'm like, no, I'm good. I don't need to add another social media platform. So I pushed off those two things to concentrate on my three pillars. And I can pat myself on the back because Clubhouse, if not dead, is on life support, and Threads isn't exactly tearing up the world either. So I think they were the right moves looking back.
I looked at both of them and said, really? I see no proof here. I'm not
It
even
was
really seeing proof of life here.
it,
What's
it was
going
so
on?
strange. Yeah, there were adults in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, I knew, that the main reason they liked Threads was, and I heard this from a few of them, oh my gosh, it's amazing. I've been on there trashing Elon Musk all day. Haha, isn't that, it's fun, it's awesome. And I'm thinking, okay, you're going onto this platform, spending all this time to insult a billionaire who will never know that you're alive. Maybe you should change your priorities a little bit, handle your time management differently. For me, that's not a good selling point. Now, I'm on Twitter. I'm very, or X, I guess, but I'm very careful there. I view it more for content ideas that I get, and it kind of, you have to be careful. It could be a dumpster fire too, but I'm not spending all day sending out 100 tweets or anything like that.
Left years ago because it was a swamp. It was just awful. And
Yes.
then when Elon Musk bought it, I went, okay, I'll go back and look, and I like it. But you're right, you
Yes.
have to be careful. And now the threads in Instagram, what the heck is that all? I'm ignoring it. No, thank you. It's I just don't have time or the energy to go figure it all out. Once it's proven, I'll jump in, maybe. But right now, no.
Yeah, it's never a bad idea to grab your name. If you pop in, it takes a minute. If there's a new platform that you had nothing to lose there, because you'd hate to jump in 5 years, and then if there's a name that you really want, whether it be your name or your company or whatever, then you don't have it. But I definitely new platform, a new shiny object really has to impress me for me to divert my time and energy over to it.
TikTok, I have zero interest in TikTok. But I do have my name over there. If I ever want it, it's there. But chances are, no, I don't. It's just not for me. I've got other things to do.
I
So,
flirted with TikTok, and
did
I
you?
made maybe 10 of them. And I realized very quickly that TikTok's a platform that you have to go all in with it to get the results. And I also didn't feel like my ideal or target clients were there. So it's a little bit younger crowd, of course, and I don't know. Yeah, for me, I have, same as you, have my name there and stuff, but I deleted it off my phone for other reasons too. Data, privacy, Chinese government, all that fun stuff. I said, nah, I really
Exactly.
don't want this on my phone.
Yeah, exactly. So let's move to building without fancy tools. When you said that to me during the pre-interview, my eyebrows went up. I went, okay, now we're talking. Look, I'm a web developer. I'm a nerd in stilettos. That doesn't mean I have to be on and using everything. In fact, like you just mentioned, we have to be careful. Shiny object, we're going to get distracted. We need to have those three pillars and work those until or unless one of them is no longer working, and then substitute it with something else.
Mm.
But you can't be everywhere all the time.
No, exactly.
The effective ways to build an online business without relying on expensive funnels or ads. I mean, I can build them. I do build them. I'll be honest with you, I don't really love them. I
Yeah.
just don't.
I guess, and when I say that without funnels, technically there's always a funnel. Even if you put a call out on social media for someone to book a call with you, for example, then I guess that could be argued that that's a funnel. What I'm referring to more is when people jump in and they spend 6 months, a year, and gobs of money with this big complicated funnel with upsells, downsells, diagonal sells, crisscross, blah, blah. It looks like if they had a whiteboard, it would look like Russell Crowe in A Beautiful Mind, that meme where he's got all the calculations or whatever when he was the mathematician in that movie. And they just end up confusing themselves and they confuse everyone else. I'm really big on simple. And I once had a client years ago who, when we started working together, I said, now before our first call, can you just give me a brief overview, your current offerings, stuff like that. I want to make sure that I know what you're doing. And he said, yeah, I'll send you an email, Mark. And he attached a spreadsheet, and he had 28 offers there of just all varying lengths of time, deliverables for number of calls per week. Time was different for all the calls, all the pricing. And I was just, my eyes were glossed over. And I said to him, I said, honestly, this really confused me. And I said, it's probably confusing you too, right? If you're wondering how much, which I'm talking to Denise and I'm going to see which of these 28 offers are the best fit for her. And that's not the way to do it. So I'm not saying that you can't have multiple offers, but you want to be really careful about, it's just like, like Five Guys, the burger chain or fast food has had the same couple items for however many decades. They don't have hundreds and hundreds of things that you can choose. And I think there's a lesson to learn from them.
And when you were talking about that, I remembered years ago, and I don't know if it was something somebody said to me or I read it somewhere, but basically the message that I received was that, oh, I know what it was. It was a podcast guest, and she was telling me off the show that she had spent, like you said, about a year creating this fantastic product that she had not tested before.
Mm.
Nobody wanted it.
That's
either
soul
before her
sucking.
time.
Yeah.
She used that term. It just sucked the soul
Yeah.
right out of her. She was heartbroken, and she said she spent a crap ton of money, her words, a lot of time, but she had not asked the market what they wanted.
Yeah,
It
and
was
you
a
have to
big
put yourself in
lesson.
their shoes. Yeah, because
Yeah.
I'm sure she knew whatever niche she's in or topic probably like the back of her hand, and I'm sure she's very good at that. But at the end of the day, it's what do the people want, and Gary Halbert talked about that, feed a starving crowd. Robert Corey wrote a book with that title too, that's great. And it's, you find out what that crowd is hungry for and then you serve it up to them, piping hot plate of whatever with it. So it's not what we want. Now, I'm all for building a business with your interests and what you're really good at and things. I think that it can be personalized that way. But when it comes to your offers, you really have to read the room, so to speak. And unfortunately, a lot of coaches, online entrepreneurs don't do that.
Because people are saying, oh, I need a coach. No, I don't need a coach. It's hooey. And I know you believe that people need coaches. You've proven it. Tell me a bit about your early experiences with a coach. You said earlier that you had a couple of people that helped pull you up out of the
Yeah.
ditch, so to speak.
Well, the big takeaway that many years later that I take from one of them and still recall is my energy levels and mood probably wasn't the best going through a business closure, right? And not that there's ever any good business closure, but often if it's let's say an older person, older couple that know that they're going to be closing the business, they plan years in advance, and it's all neat, tidy, and orderly. And that wasn't, like that type of thing. It was just implosion. And was attacked. I say attacked. The media was running stories, and a lot of people were upset. And I'm not trying to deflect blame because it was a crappy situation. I would do things differently now, years later. But my mood wasn't the best. And one of the coaches I remember saying to me is what he identified was almost like I was, a few things. I had like a scarlet letter on me that I was the only entrepreneur that went through a business closure. And then he admitted to me a few of them that he had had. And then he told me about other people. And he said, do you know so-and-so? Do you know so-and-so? Do you know this? And I'm like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And he's like, did you know that they went through the same thing, business closure, bankruptcy, and all that other stuff? And I was like, oh, wow, that really turned my thinking around, because I had thought that, I'm a piece of crap and I'm the only person that's gone through this. And he also pointed out, like, hey, yeah, it didn't end well, but you had a decade where you did a lot of great stuff. Like I started in real estate at 21 years old, no money, no contacts. I looked like I was about 15. It's like, someone get this kid a sandwich. I probably weighed about 130 pounds soaking wet back then. And build it up from there, into the top of my market over the years. And he said that took a lot, to do that. So those are a few things that where it comes to coaches helping you. I mentioned earlier, they're away from the situation and they can look in and tell you things or point out things that you may not have realized with it. So I'm very grateful that here's a quick story actually about coaches to show where I screwed up. A few years before my real estate business closed, a coach came into my office. My admins said, hey, Mark, someone's here to see you or whatever. So anyways, I spoke to him for a few minutes and he said he's a business coach. Now we're probably talking 2006 and I hadn't really heard of this too much. I'm thinking, oh, gee, people actually have a business and a livelihood being a business coach in my local city. And so we chatted for a few minutes, and to make a long story short, I didn't hire him because in my head, I'm thinking, can't you look around, see how great we're doing? We got, this many employees and look at all the listings, look at all the sales and all that other stuff. Playing Monday morning quarterback after the business closed, I thought, wow, I probably should have listened to him a little more and maybe done some work with him because things may not have ended like they did if I had given him a chance with it. So I always keep that in the back of my mind too, is that was a missed opportunity. But now that being said, I wouldn't be chatting with you here today and I wouldn't have experienced all the stuff that I've experienced in the last 10 years as a coach if I was still in real estate. Who knows? I could be, in all honesty, I did not want to be, down the road in my 60s, 70s, being in real estate. I just, I think subconsciously, I just did not want to do that. And I'm having a lot of fun with the coaching.
With your coaching. I mean, you closed your business, you're walking around with a head full of mush. We all do. We all have setbacks. You may have death in the family. You may have several deaths in the family. You may have your business is suffering. I mean, and all of these things can be happening simultaneously. It's never one at a time, is it? But how did you say, you know what? I've been helped by my coaches. This is really where my passion is. How do I start? Because and let me reiterate a little bit there. There's a lot of information online. This is, oh, you have to be certified. You have to do this. I don't have to do anything. Look, I'm one of those people. You can't tell me much. I fight with my nav system. I'm going to figure it out on my own. So
Yes.
tell me how you started.
Well, I do fight with Siri on my phone sometimes. Maybe she doesn't pick up my Canadian accent, but I'll ask her for directions to a certain street and she'll tell me something that's like down in California. I'm in Canada.
Right.
Nope. Anyway, so when I started, I said, okay, I don't want to do real estate. Been there, did it, done it, got the t-shirt, and it was staring me right in the face. I said, I want to do a business that isn't restricted by my local area, so I could work with people all over the world. Something I could do from a laptop if I want to travel, do whatever. Something that is flexible. I could set my own schedule because that was an issue with real estate. I was working 24/7. Someone called and bang, I'm off listing a house or showing a house or whatever. And coaching was staring me right in the face. Now, when I first launched my coaching business, I said, okay, I'm going to be a business coach, a coach for entrepreneurs, because entrepreneurs, I always say, they make the world go round, but they don't get enough support, I don't believe, from society, from politicians, from anyone. So I said, I want to help entrepreneurs. And it was too broad, and goes to niching and stuff, is it's very difficult if you're trying to appeal to everyone. You often appeal to none. What had happened was, with those early clients that I'd had, two of them were coaches, and I enjoyed those sessions more than and nothing against other people, but I said, I'm really, those are the ones that fired me up when I was starting my day. And I said, you know what, I'm going to narrow things down and focus only on coaches. And since then, I haven't deviated. Sometimes I'll have someone reach out to me, maybe it's social media, they hear the podcast or whatever, and they own a different business, widget company or whatever, don't work with them. I'm like, look, that's not me. I only work with coaches. However, I look through my mental Rolodex, and I've met a lot of business coaches I know through the podcast, etc., and I'll refer them off to those people. So I do think it's very important. Say that's why I'm not a fan of when people say that they're life coaches, and yeah, I'll help you with your relationships, your health, your finances, blah blah blah. Very difficult if you try to be everything to everyone. Now, some of those things could come into play. Sometimes I feel like a life coach when I'm working with clients, and sometimes I've felt like a relationship coach if they're having issues with their spouse or whatever, especially over their business. But you can't lead with trying to say do everything. You got to get them through the door first, and then you use your talents and your tools to help them the best that you can.
Referring them to someone else, because I do it all the time. As a web developer, I'll have, I always have a conversation or two or three, and it may dawn quickly or later down the road that I'm not the best fit for you and you're not the best fit for me for whatever reasons. Maybe it's a website that I just don't see it going anywhere, no matter how much work we put in it. I've actually had people say, well, I just need a website. I don't want social media. And I will tell them, unless you have a social media plan, I can't
Yeah.
build it for you, because I will literally be building you a really pretty boat anchor. You're going to be mad. I'm going to be mad. Let's not do it. And I'll refer them to somebody else.
Yeah. And unfortunately, a lot of people do feel like, hey, if I have a killer website, really awesome one, then if you build it, they will come. And it doesn't work like that. I was watching a documentary the other night, a YouTube video about Dane Cook, the comedian, and he was really big back in the early 2000s. And the way that he got his start wasn't through the way that most comedians did back then. He was up and coming when MySpace was the big thing. So MySpace was the most popular social media platform from 2005 to 2008 before Facebook knocked it off. But what he did, it said in this documentary, is every night he had, I think it was 2,500 MySpace friends or followers in the early days. And he would spend a couple hours every night for 4 years messaging those MySpace friends and telling them about his, upcoming shows or whatever. And it wasn't a copied and pasted insincere message. He would look at their wall and he'd say, hey, Denise, I see you had your birthday last Friday. I hope you had a great one or whatever. Hey, I just want to tell you, here's what's going on. And that's how he got going. He eventually had to stop because it grew from 2,500 people up into like millions of people, and he just couldn't keep up with it. But by then he was selling out Madison Square Garden 2 nights in a row and just was a really big deal for a few years there. It's unfortunately the same thing that we have to do now with social media. MySpace isn't around, but I did a launch earlier this year for a program, and I set a goal. We had a 1 month runway for the early bird with it. And I said, I'm going to send 1,000 messages. So I knew I had to send 250 a week, which is quite a bit. Now that could be written like Facebook Messenger, email, or it could be, and that's personalized email, not an email list, by the way. Or it could be like a voice note. I end up doing a lot of individualized voice messages. And I did hit that 1,000, and the launch went really well. Now that 1,000, some of them were follow-ups I did. Maybe people say, hey, check in with me in 2 weeks, Mark. But yeah, it would have been nice if I didn't have to send 1,000 messages and that everyone could just come in without doing that. But unfortunately, you have to prime the pump sometimes with it. And yeah, you got to be prepared to roll up your sleeves. It's for me as a coach, when I'm working with coaches, what I always found difficult in the early days, if someone wasn't willing to put in those kind of efforts, I would put in extra on my end just to get them across the finish line. And you really can't do that. That's not what coaching is about. If somebody's sitting on the couch all day watching Netflix and doesn't want to do any work, I can't help them. No one can help them. They have to help themselves. And that's a very important lesson.
And the work that I do, I will often catch myself creating my own scope creep, because I can't let it sit. If it's not getting done, it has to be done, and I'll go do it. Then they rely on me. It's like I became their auntie or their mama. And then
Yes.
I'm mad, and I'm mad at myself. So I've had to really knuckle down and say, don't do it. Give them the information, give them a timeline. They've got to do it.
Yeah, I've had clients before, and I want to help my clients, obviously, but they've asked me things that would take 5 seconds to Google. Hey, Mark, how do you do this? Right?
Exactly.
Try to think of an example. How do you, have your Instagram posts go directly to Facebook automatically? Well, that is something that's Googleable. Is that a word? So I jokingly with one of them, we had a good relationship. So he took it in stride. But there's a picture. If you ever anyone's ever dealing with this, do a search on Google, ironically, for Google free search coupon, and I saved it to my phone and to my computer, so I have sent it to clients before, and it's basically says this entitles you to one free Google search, which is kind of a funny way to say, hey, don't be asking me this, you got to Google this, and you're probably going to get a better answer too, because I'm not a tech wizard on everything. So I want to be helpful for clients, but that's really not enabling them. Like, they need to have uh, it has to be ingrained that they have the resourcefulness to figure some things out themselves, that they're not just relying on the coach for everything, because that's, like a parent toddler type relationship, which coaching isn't.
Glad you brought that up, because once I do take on a client, part of the onboarding process is me telling them Google is your friend. And you're going to email me on occasion, and I'm just going to send back Google is your friend. In other words, do it your own damn self. I'm not going to do it for you. That's not what you hired me for, and I wouldn't be doing you any favors.
Exactly.
I have to go look that up. Google free sample. I also wrote down, you talked about Gary Halbert. He's copywriter. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Rest in peace. He's passed away. His
That's what
son
I thought.
Bond is
Yeah.
doing some stuff. He's in my Facebook group.
Right.
On the Google search, I have a friend. We have a group text thread, my brother and then a friend. And our friend he's a busy guy. He's in law is his profession, but he has a really bad habit of not keeping up with current events. So if we send something about, I don't know, whatever the hot topic is of the day that 99% of the earth has heard about, he'll say, well, what's the deal with that? Or whatever. And then he wants us to type out 1,000-word, overview of it. And I've used the Google coupon search for that too. Like, come on, man, just Google it.
That's If I take nothing away from this conversation today, I'm going to go find that coupon. So building a community like your Facebook group, and I'm a little bit jealous because I got kicked out of Facebook in August. I have no idea why. I've been there 19 years. I've always been a good girl. I've never been smacked but I just disappeared. And oddly, my two groups are there. I have a feline office assistant group, and my podcast page is there. I'm not there, but I'm still in Instagram. It's really strange. So finally, after 3 months of me just giving them everything they wanted, I get a note yesterday, says, okay, you get back in, do this. I can't get back in. I hate
No,
Facebook right now.
I
Hate
heard
them.
that from someone else. Recently, I interviewed someone for my show, and I hadn't talked to him in years. He was on my show in 2016 last. And I hadn't seen anything popping up on Facebook and things. And in the back of my mind, I thought, did he unfriend me or whatever? But we connected on LinkedIn, and we talked about doing a podcast interview swap. And he got talking about his experience where one day he opened up his Facebook and there was a copyright infringement or something, and basically said your account's being closed. And he had no clue whatsoever. He did everything by the book. He relied on Facebook for years for his business, did it all the right way. And he said 3 months is what he spent trying to go through their help process, which Facebook is awful. If you're not going to speak to a real person, and you're going to get these bot answers that just move you around in a circle. And so he was fighting with them for 3 months, like, hey, what's going on? And he finally said, you know what, screw it. He's like, I'm done. And he said it was painful for a bit because so much of his business was being done on Facebook. But he said at the end of the day, it was a good thing for him because it forced him to rely on other things like his email list, his podcast, LinkedIn. He's still on there. So it ended up being a positive. And sometimes I have a dream of, oh my God, that'd be so nice to not be on Facebook, right? Especially in an election year for you guys that's coming up. It could be a dumpster fire. So I have a bit of a love-hate relationship, but overall, Facebook's been good for my business, so I can't complain. But yeah, the lesson that I took from that person, I don't think he'd mind me saying his name because he talked about it on my podcast, David Ralph. The lesson I took from David's experience with Facebook is that it's never the end of the world. You can always pivot and then build. He's making more money now than he ever has. So it ended up working out well. It's just a little dicey there for a few months.
Week or so, I almost felt like I was bereaved. It was crazy. I have a lot of friends on Facebook, and
Yeah.
a lot of conversations and 19 years of memories and pictures, all gone, just
Ugh.
gone. I know. And then finally they said, okay, we'll let you back in. And I really thought about, do I even want to bother? So I'll go ahead and I clicked the link and I put the little code and it doesn't work. I was like, I'm not going to keep doing this.
No.
I moved over to LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I'm doing more with Twitter, and I'm really working to build up my email list because I've never been good with it. I admit that. And I know that Hush, my cat, she's 19 years old. She's telling me she's hungry. Um, and I'm telling her she
Yeah.
has kitty dementia because she just ate before we got on this call. So anyway,
I, and
that's my life.
I'm glad you mentioned about Facebook, Denise, because one recommendation I would make for people, not a lot of people know you could do this. You could back up your Facebook account. Takes just, 30 seconds to click a few things, and
I
people
know.
can Google it how to do
I
it.
wish I
Um,
did, but I
and
didn't.
it's
But it
yeah,
is what it
so
is.
it's not a bad idea every 6 months or so. And I do the same thing with my email list because you never know what might happen. So if you have it backed up, and then there's something freeing about starting a fresh account. And if you have those friends, you can reach out, but you can also be very deliberate with who you're adding, because if you've been on Facebook 20 years or whatever, there's going to be a lot of I say dead wood that's on there, right? Like people who their accounts are no longer there. I've run into a lot of people who've passed away, which that really puts things in perspective.
It
I've had a couple
does. Yeah.
podcast guests of mine that I just heard through the grapevine. Two of them passed away, and I'm like, holy geez. So it's not a bad idea to back your stuff up for peace of mind.
Get back in there. I mean, I'm tired of fighting with it. And I'm finding that I'm happier elsewhere, to
Yeah,
be honest. So, you're right. I mean, I
yeah,
probably should go ahead and get back in there, but it's not a priority. That first week or two, I was pacing the floors. It's like, oh my, it
yeah.
was a habit. Jump on Facebook. Oh, hi, how y'all doing? Then I couldn't do that anymore. But I realized after that, bereavement period passed, I had been spending way too much wasted time on Facebook. And I mean
Oh,
wasted.
guilty as charged. Now I do
Me
have
too.
help with my Facebook group and things like that, but they're very good. Not just Facebook, all those social media platforms are designed to have you addicted and hooked, right? Like that. The longer they keep you on there, then that's more money that they're making. I realized this years ago. I was going to make myself a pizza in the oven. And I said, okay, put in for whatever 20 minutes. I said, I'll just pop on Facebook, check, for messages, news feed, etc. And it was like what I thought was 2 minutes later, the oven buzzes. And I thought, geez, that's weird. Like, what's going on? It's only been a couple minutes. And then I look at my watch and no, and sure enough, it's been 20 minutes. So in my mind, I say it's a lot like, people have stories about being abducted by aliens with lost time. 1 minute they're out fishing
Right.
and remote lake, and then 12 hours later they're naked wandering down some road or whatever, and they can't remember what happened. That's what it's like with Facebook and some of these ones. You don't even realize. It was one of the reasons we talked about TikTok earlier. I didn't While I didn't post much on TikTok, I was a consumer. TikTok is very good at knowing what you like and feeding it back to you, right? It's like an echo chamber. And I wasn't spending 3 hours a day like some people on TikTok. But if I was being honest with myself, I looked and I'm like, I'm probably spending 45 minutes a day Now, some of it might be on the toilet or wherever, if I'm standing in line at the grocery store or whatever, it's not 45 minutes all at once. But I thought that's not good for me, and it's not good for my attention span and so on. So that was the other reason I deleted TikTok, and I didn't miss it. I was like, oh, gee, I've been using it and consuming it, during COVID, probably for a year or two, and I'm going to probably miss this. I'm like, no, I don't. I felt much better with it. So I've flirted with changing my relationship with social media as well to have a more healthy relationship. I've read some great books on it. Like there's 24/6 is one. I can't remember the author's name, but she takes a full day off from all digital devices, her and her family. So hence a 24/6 instead of 24/7. I'm not there yet. Maybe one day.
Yeah, I haven't quite made it either, but you're talking about just getting lost in Facebook. It's kind of like that last 20 minutes when you're going back home, you're in the car, you don't know, you wind up in your driveway and you're like, how did I get here?
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
just, you just lost all sense of time.
And it really
It's
doesn't
scary.
matter. Like if you think about it, I bet most people could cut their time on social media in half and not lose any business. And who knows, they probably would get a lot more business because they would use that time savings to do some other things. One thing that I do, and I make an effort to, I'm a big reader. Like I'm addicted to reading. I can't recall the last day I didn't read, a
Yep.
portion of a book. I always have books near me on my desk and on the floor and stuff here in the home office. And if I'm waiting for someone, let's say I've got 5 minutes early for a Zoom call or whatever, instead of picking up my phone and just doom scrolling or whatever, I'll get one of those books. And right now I'm looking at one. It's called The Book of Unusual Knowledge, and it's got these, this cool little facts and stuff like that. I'll read a couple pages of that while I'm waiting, and then I get a lot of content ideas from that too. Facebook, social media stuff, that's really junk food for the brain. And there's not a lot of unique stuff. I know some of these influencers or entrepreneurs, I see coaches that try to do this really deep thing there with posts. I'm like, yeah, no, that was so and so. Brian Tracy said that 20 years ago, or Gary Halbert said that, or whatever. They're just repackaging it. There's one guy, I haven't heard from him in a long time. He was big in 2015-ish, 2016, and he had a big Facebook group and stuff, but his whole shtick was cursing a lot. Now, I'm not opposed to cursing, I don't like not dropping F bombs and stuff on my podcast or in my emails. I might use a little bit salty language, but his whole shtick was cursing, like dropping F bombs and stuff. And he was in the copywriting world, and I looked at his stuff and I'm like, you know what? He's just regurgitating like Brian
Yeah.
Tracy said that or whatever. He's literally saying what these greats said, but then he's throwing in an F bomb, or whatever. And it's nothing new that's in there, and he's disappeared. I haven't seen him in years, so I don't know. I guess his shtick didn't work in the long run, but it was a little bit strange to see it because I could see what was going on where I've read a lot of those people, and yeah, that was his package.
I'm like you. I read constantly. I was reading when I was 3 years old. Didn't know what I was reading, but I was reading. Nobody taught me. I just picked up
Yeah.
books and decided to do it. And I will read the back of a cereal box if nothing else is
Yes.
available. And I hate cereal. So
Well,
it's,
where I got hooked on reading is I grew up outside the city. We were in the country, and when I started grade seven, we went into I say big city for East Coast of Canada. But our bus ride was over an hour long by the time you weaved in and out of different roads and subdivisions and so on the way into town. So I'm very grateful that I didn't have screens back then, like iPad, iPhones, or whatever, because I brought books to read on the bus on the way home, the way to school and the way home. And then if we were ever driving into town for whatever, I'd be reading in the back, with it. And that's how I got introduced really to, in the early days, I say early days, like middle school, junior high, it was a lot of political stuff because I was and I still am a political nut. So I'd read a lot of political books, sports, biographies, autobiographies. And then I stumbled across Think and Grow Rich in high school. And then that got me into the whole personal development side of things as well. But yeah, that's what worries me about the new generation nowadays. I see it. My son is 16 and he's not into books a whole lot, but he's like on his phone a lot. And the same with all his friends too. You know, it's very antiquated to think of and he reads some books, don't get me wrong, but he's not, usually his go-to would probably be his phone. And that worries me with screens, 20, 30 years down the road. What's the impact of what's going on today? What's that going to look like?
You're going to be blind. You mentioned Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. My Wednesday co-host is Ben Gay III. And I don't know if you know who he is, but he is the author of the Closers series. Closers 1 and 2, they've sold millions of these books. And he was the final mentee of Dr. Napoleon Hill. He's got amazing stories. And I was talking with him yesterday, and I'll read anything, seriously. And I was reading about Napoleon Hill, or I was looking for something. I couldn't sleep at all, so I decided to read all night and all morning. But I came across a man named Ralph Waldo Trine, Trine. And a lot of what Dr. Napoleon Hill and Henry Ford took through their lives came from him. Ralph Waldo Trine. Look him up. He's fascinating.
Yeah, I will. It's yeah, and nowadays, really, if you look at a lot of personal developments, Think and Grow Rich is probably the one that most acts as a boilerplate for a lot of them. They might dress it up differently with it, but it really boils down to a lot of that. The longer I'm at it, I do read a lot of personal development, but I like different type stuff. I can't do a Think and Grow Rich knockoff type book. And I'm really into biographies and autobiographies. I enjoy those. So I usually have about 10 books on the go. I dip in and out of different ones. It's not just one book and then I finish it like a normal person. I usually have different books for different moods.
The one thing I really love about my podcast is I get to interview authors, and I've got 3 bookcases in this room, hundreds of books. Every single one of them was gifted to me by one of my podcast hosts. I've read them, I review them, I pick them up, I read them. If they're really fat with sticky notes, I know I got to go back to that one because that's how I keep track. And I've got 2 Kindles and a phone. Each one, I can pick it up and I'm reading a different book. So I get it. I understand what you're saying. And ask you because we're talking about Facebook, and I wanted to mention or ask about the value of community because your Facebook group is huge. But my question, Mark, is how do you contribute to business growth without on a Facebook group or creating a Facebook group without significant financial investment? That's a big topic these days. People are worried about money. They're always worried about money, but right now, really worried.
Well, the good news for a community is it doesn't cost a lot of money to set up. Facebook groups free, or a lot of times nowadays people are doing school communities, $100 a month or whatever, but it's not a crazy amount. You are paying with your time to build it up. The reason that I like communities is it gets people away from all the noise on their standard news feed, whatever platform, say Facebook, for example. If you're relying just on your news feed, the analogy I use is it's like you're in a little boat in the middle of the ocean. You might get found, but the ocean's a pretty big and noisy place, right? Your community is like a private island that you're bringing people to. Now, I say you don't want to be like Epstein Island or anything like that. It's a good island. But it's a place where people get to know, like, and trust you. And it's a closed off, like a country club or island, to use that analogy. And it's not as noisy. It gets away from the general news feed, which we know reach has been going down for years. Facebook and the other platforms are meaning that fewer people are seeing what you're posting out there. So you don't need a group with 26,000 people either, by the way. I know some coaches and online entrepreneurs who have just a couple hundred people in their groups, but they do very well with it because of the right people. So I would take a group that had 500 excellent people in there than a group of 10,000 if they're not the right people, or if it's bots or spammers. We're very careful with the coaching jungle with criteria the team goes through, and there's probably 5 or 6 main things that we look for. The group could be much larger. I could probably have 50,000 people in there now, but I don't, there'd be no sense if it's spammers or the wrong type of people or fake accounts.
When I was still in Facebook, I belonged to several different pages
Mm,
and groups. And listen, I had to be very careful about what I was willing to take from some of those groups, podcast groups in particular. The amount of god awful information in those things is just, it's horrendous.
yes.
I mean, it's really frightening. People are just saying, oh, blah, 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 blah. And people will say, oh, great, I'm going to go do that. Oh, no, don't, no. I have to get out of there because they start wanting to hit my head on my desk. It's bad.
Yes. And unfortunately, the loudest voices or the ones that seem the most confident, a lot of people can follow their bad advice. Luckily, cream rises to the top. So if someone's giving advice, whether it be like you mentioned, a podcasting stuff in a group, or advice to coaches that just isn't very good, then they're probably going to exit the industry, or they're not going to do very well with it eventually. I saw a lot of people in the late 20 teens, like 2018, 2019, that appeared to be killing it, who are out of the coaching world now. And from here, I talk with a lot of people and you hear stuff, but what happened was often they were really good at getting that first sale from someone and getting a high ticket client, but their stuff just didn't work, and they weren't good at getting repeat business or referrals or anything like that. So the market does correct itself eventually, but it can be a little frustrating. I know I'm going off on a tangent, but it can be frustrating to see the bad apples in the online space, because then it ruins it for the good people like you and me. And what I'm seeing out there now, there's a lot of prospects who've been burned, or they're very skeptical. And it's almost like if you're dating someone who just dated a bunch of idiots before that cheated on them in the past, you're in a relationship with them now, but they've carried that over in here. Well, this happened to me 5 years ago or whatever. And I'm having to, kind of talk them through that, hey, look, I'm sorry you had that experience. This is different. And, but overall, I think it's good to have a skeptical marketplace, and well-informed consumer, I think, is good overall.
And if you're still traumatized by something that happened 5 years ago, you may need to talk with somebody. I'm just
Well,
saying.
Well, the other side of the coin too, I'm in a subreddit. And speaking of dumpster fires, I have to be very careful the time I spend in Reddit, because that's,
There, I
not.
get lost in there. You talk
Oh,
about Facebook and you all of a sudden
yeah,
your pizza's burning. I'm on
yeah.
Reddit and then I'm thinking, okay, was I supposed to be doing something right now
Well,
that was important?
there's a subreddit that's devoted to basically just bashing coaches. And I know really good coaches who've been bashed in there, people who've done well for their clients, wouldn't hurt a fly, and they're getting bashed. So if you just looked at that, you would think, oh my God, like there's no good coaches out there. Not saying that there's not some true stories and stuff, but what I suspect has happened is there are people who are probably, just didn't do the work with whatever they hired the coach for. It wasn't the coach's fault. It was the person's fault. But it's very easy to blame a coach, right? If you've spent thousands of dollars and then you didn't do the work and you didn't get the results, well, that's kind of on you too. I know a coach who always equates it to a basketball game. He says, as a coach, we could go to the center of the court, but we can't go down to your end and sink the ball for you, put in the net or whatever. Like, we can only go a certain way there, and then you have to meet us halfway.
Wouldn't would have said. Um, Charging what you're worth. That's a big deal. Listen, I've been guilty of just not charging enough. And then I've been guilty of saying, okay, now I'm mad. To myself, not to the client, but
Mm.
you can get in some big trouble with yourself if you're not charging sufficiently for the work you're doing, making sure that you're taking in scope creep, because there's always going to be scope creep, and not getting pissy with the client because
Mhm.
you made
Yeah,
that mistake. Been there, done it.
right. And charging what you're worth, I know it sounds kind of like a cliche, it should be in a Hallmark card or something, but I do think there's something to be said for that. And the challenge for coaching is that the prices it's a wild west. You know, you have people charging peanuts. Well, you actually have people doing free coaching, which I never recommend. But so it goes anywhere from free 25, $50 a session to six figures for a year, multiple six figures for a year. And then you're thinking, oh, gee, how much should I charge? So the way I always say it is you want to charge enough that until it stops feeling good. So, for example, if I suddenly decided today, hey, I'm going to start charging $10 million for a year of coaching with me. Now, I would love to get $10 million. Let me know, Denise. I can shoot you my PayPal link and we can get started on Monday. But deep down, I
Okay.
know that, hey, yeah, I can't
You have
charge.
to take stride. I
Yeah,
don't
I
think
can't
PayPal
charge
will let you
10
do
million.
that much.
I can't charge $10 million, and I saw a successful entrepreneur talking about this too, where he helps millionaires because he's a multimillionaire, but he said he can't put it out there that he's helping billionaires because in his mind, like he's never helped, he hasn't made that and it hasn't been in that world, which sounds funny, multimillionaires and that, but it just goes
Yeah.
to show. So you want to get to a point where it feels good. And if I said $10 million, Denise, to work with me. Now, if I said to you, Denise, here's what I could do for you, it's $10,000 because I have gotten $10,000 for one-on-one client. That feels good for me because I've done that before. And hopefully I'm always challenging myself with it. I was speaking with a coach. She's on my podcast just the other day. She charges $35,000 a year. And that gets my mind thinking, okay, wait a minute, she's charging 35,000. This is what she does. Yeah, maybe we can bump that up more. So it has to feel good when you're saying that. And if it doesn't, I think that energy is going to be felt by the prospect that you don't firmly believe it. It's going to be difficult to sell it.
Listen, you advocate for being polarizing in your messaging. Tell me what that's all about. Why is people pleasing detrimental to the coaching business?
So I'll preface it by saying with polarizing, it doesn't mean that you say, I'm going to be the biggest jerk on the internet and just insult people all day. I've seen people who do polarizing the wrong way and then they get into fights on social media and they spend all their time doing that instead of building their business. But the issue with too many online entrepreneurs is that they're so afraid of saying anything that could cause some blowback or lose an email subscriber or a social media contact will unfriend them. And that's not good either because then it means that you end up going into the mushy middle too much. So, for example, with my business, I often talk about, my love of capitalism, which isn't always popular nowadays, So I have some, which really strange. There's a lot of coaches that are like Marxist, far left type ones or whatever. But the reason that I can talk about capitalism, the need to make a profit, all that other stuff is that I want coaches to be making profits or they can't stay in business. And the challenge for a lot of people, especially in this highly political culture that we're in nowadays, is that they're like socialist, Marxist, or whatever, and they feel very strongly about that. But then they're struggling in their business and they don't see that disconnect that you're in a capitalist system where you have to provide value and then you get compensated for that value. The people who are out there making changes in the coaching world or just anywhere in the world, it's not the ones that are whining with signs and laying down on the street and trying to disrupt traffic and stuff like that. With a lot of these protesters are losers, right? Not all of them, I'm not saying, but a lot of them nowadays are. I would rather be on the side of the people who are working, who are giving value to the universe instead of just constantly complaining, because you'll never keep them happy. They'll just move on to something else, the next hot cause of the day or whatever. So there's an example of polarizing because some people who listen to your show might be far left people and think, oh my God, this guy's a far right Nazi or something, oh my God, he likes capitalism, so he should be burned at the stake. But yeah, there's an example of polarizing. And I do that because I don't want to work with people who don't like capitalism and don't think you should be making profit, they're not going to be a good fit for me. I can work with people with different political beliefs, by the way. I mean, one of my favorite past clients is a Bernie Sanders supporter. She didn't tell me we were on a Zoom call, and she took a sip of her coffee, and it was a Bernie Sanders mug. And then she goes, "Oh my God," like that. She put it down. I'm like, "Oh, gee," we had a laugh about it. I'm like, "Hey, don't be ashamed or whatever with it." But I can't work with the ones that are out to lunch talking about eat the rich and all this other stuff. I have no desire to work with them.
And I get along with just about anybody until you start attacking me for something. At that point, it's
Yeah.
over. I just don't play the game. I don't play in the mud with you, but I'm a
Yeah.
capitalist too.
Well, I had a guest on my show earlier this year, Joshua Lysick, and he wrote a great book called, oh God, it's right behind me. So Good They Call You a Fake. I think that's it. And he wrote another book that I'm looking at now on humans. But anyways, Joshua is a ghostwriter, and he's worked with some really big names, and he's super successful and stuff. And he actually has it in his copy, his material, the stuff he's putting out there, that he won't work with offals. And I said to him, I said, "What's an offal?" And he said, "Offal is an affluent white female liberal." He said, "I've worked with a few that were nightmares." Now, I'm not saying don't work with that type person, but that's his, and it's his business and his rules, right? So that's his choice. He said, "I've never had a good experience. They scope creep. They've been demanding. They've just been complaining about stuff, and he won't work with them." So I'm really big on having this goes into the ideal client criteria that I keep for my business is, I have certain things like they have to be fun to work with. They have to have big goals. If somebody comes to me and they're like, "Yeah, I want to have a coaching business, make a little bit extra pocket change or whatever, $500 a month," that doesn't really get me excited. They have to be willing to put the work in. So they're action oriented, action takers. They have to pay me what I'm worth and on time. So it's like the book, Michael Port, Book Yourself Solid. He talks about the red velvet rope
I
policy.
have it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So he says treat your business like the hot club or restaurant in town. Any Tom, Dick, or Harry can't just stroll up to the door and expect to get in right away. They have to be on a list. And you just imagine you got that bouncer at the front of the door, 6'7", 350 pounds with the clipboard, and he's looking at these things and he's saying, "Okay, do they match that criteria that I just mentioned?" And if they don't, then don't take them on. As much as you may want the money, it's going to be a headache, and it's probably not going to work out well for you or the person. So you need to have some confidence there, and definitely have that ideal client burned into your mind, and you're judging everyone who comes into your world against that and saying, "Does this fit that person?" I had an experience a few years back where a guy wanted to hop on Zoom with me. He was in Australia, so the time didn't work well with my calendar, me being in Canada. Now I will do calls with Aussies. I'll work something out manually to do the call in my evening, which is their next morning. But we didn't even get to that point. He said, "Mark, these times are crazy." It's at whatever time it was, his in like 3 in the morning for him. And he's like, I'm not doing a call then. He said, "Here's my calendar. You're gonna have to work around me." And he's like, "Trust me, it'll be worth it." And it said basically was, "Don't you know who I am?" There. And anyone who says, "Don't you know who I am?" that's probably a red flag. Anyways, I thought there's no way I would do anything with this guy. Like, it's just not going to be a good fit. And I said, "Hey, look, I'm not going to do the call. Good luck." And that was it. But can you imagine if you take it on? If I show up at 3 in the morning for someone and then they're acting like that right away, we don't even know each other, how are they going to be in a couple months?
We have to use our critical thinking skills, which a lot of people don't do anymore, but or if they
Mm,
ever did. But listen to what people, when they show up and they tell you who they are, believe them. Don't try to go into business. I had a client that I had to fire. I had a 3-month agreement with her, which I know I almost never do. But, there was something that told me, yeah, take the agreement. 6 weeks in, I wanted her gone in the
yeah.
worst kind of way. And I did. I got out, but I've never worked so hard because everything had to be perfect. And she touched everything. And it just, I really thought she had a serious mental illness going on. I still think it, but I got out and I never spoke to her again. She has no further access to me. But when you
Yeah.
put yourself in that position, and y'all, I knew better. I knew better, but I did it anyway.
Yeah, it's not worth it. And we've talked about scope creep several times in this interview. My brother edits podcasts, and he's been doing it. His company, they do it for 10 years now, and they have excellent clients and stuff. But he's had the odd one that is no longer he's working with because a podcast editor, they do a very good job editing the show, and he does like show notes and things like that. But there are some people that he has worked with in the past, the odd ones that expect him to be an online business manager. Like, tell me what offer should I be putting in so I can monetize the show and all this other stuff. And he said, look, I'm not a coach. Here's the service. We charge X for, here's what we'll do with the production of your show. But I'm not a coach, and I'm not going to tell you, how to monetize it. That's just not what I do. And now, what would a lot of podcast editors do? They would be so hungry for business that, oh, yeah, I could definitely help you with that. I'll give you ideas for this strategy for monetizing for launch. And, it bleeds over, and you're not going to be able to rescue that podcaster. If they have no clue what their business is or what to offer or whatever, and they're going to a podcast editor to get that answer, it's probably not going to work out well.
Should be specialist. Whether they're editing for a book, whether they're editing for a podcast, they should be specializing in, I don't know, romances or business. Or you can't, if you're a dentist, you shouldn't be doing brain surgery, is my point. We are running out of time. I wanted to ask you about email marketing, because I need to get busy. I really do. I'm picking your brain. After emailing your list daily for over 3,000 days, which is remarkable, what key lessons have you learned about turning an email list into a revenue-generating asset? And I do have another question. We may not have time for it, but what do you say for 3,000 days? I mean, my mind just boggles.
Boys, it's tough. I could talk for hours about email marketing and daily emails. First off, I'll say the first 2 years of my coaching business, I did emails like everyone else. They were very sporadic. I would email once a week, maybe every few weeks. Maybe there would be a week where I would send 2 emails out, but it was not consistent, and they were boring. They were designed not to offend. And if you had insomnia, then you could read them and you'd be put to sleep. So I was ready to give up on emailing, and I had a guest on my podcast who's a big daily email guy, and speaking to him afterwards, me griping about email marketing and stuff. He's like, well, why don't you give it a try for a month? And I thought, you know what? He's probably right. I don't have anything to lose other than a bit of time. I said, I'm going to spend a month emailing my list every day, and no pressure. I'm not going to say I'm going to make X number of sales or whatever. Just going to do it for the month and then see what happens. And while I can't say that I made $1 million in that month, I was seeing positive signs where I was getting replies back for the emails, which rarely happened before, made a few sales, and started to see some activity. And that's what got me on board the daily email train. And I haven't gotten off there since then. I think the key is, besides emailing daily, is you have to be entertaining. Even if it takes 30 seconds for a person to open and read that email, people are busy, and you have to reward them for that 30 seconds. So I tell, a lesson, maybe there's a story, something, a nugget there that I think they need to know. And then I transition into an offer every email. There's a call to action. Now, sometimes a call to action is sending them to my newest podcast episode or whatever. But I shouldn't say I'm not into nurturing. I think it's important to nurture relationships. But there are people, unfortunately, out there giving bad advice with email marketing, saying once someone's in your list, the first 50 days is a nurture sequence. Don't make any sort of offer. Then you can start making offers after 50 days. And that's a really bad way to do it. People are on your list to get help for something, and you want to give it to them. So I say you start telling them about what you do and making offers right away. And you have to be fearless. You can't be scared. People can detect that, the readers. Same thing with Facebook groups. If you're nervous, I've seen this on email and in communities where the person sending the email, or if it's a community leader, will put up a post that's something like, hey guys, yeah, I'm really sorry to, bug you with this, but I just want to mention that I have this offer that I'm putting out there. And, I appreciate it if you could take a little bit of time to do it. If it's not for you, that's totally okay. And, I'm not going to post about it again this week, or I'm not going to email, but I just wanted to let you know about it. Here's the link. Well, that's not a very strong offer. You don't feel really good about buying that. People can pick up on that energy, that nervous energy. Same thing if an email marketer hasn't emailed their list in, let's say, 6 months or a year. I've been on some of those lists where they'll then re-engage a list. They'll send the first email that they have in a year, and it's, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I'm so embarrassed. I know I haven't been emailing. I need to do better, blah, blah, blah. And they're going on like they ran over your dog or something. You can make a joke about it, like, hey, I wasn't in the witness relocation program. Hope you missed me, but I'm back. And then bang, you're off to what you want them to know. Uh, Boys, oh, your other question about where do I get content ideas? It's like going to the gym, you're building up your content creation muscles. It comes in time. If you're doing something that often, just like brush your teeth, it's going to become natural. So I get ideas from things happening in my life, things happen with my clients. Now, keeping confidentiality in mind, of course, stuff I read, things from pop culture, movies, TV series, boys, blogs, stuff I pick up on YouTube, just all over the place. Once you start doing daily emails, it's like you have a radar that's up, and then you're seeing stuff as you go along your day, and you think, wow, that'd be great to mention this to my email list. I'm going to mention this. So it does get easier. When I first started daily emails, it probably took an hour to write those early emails, an hour each. Now I can crank an email out in 10 minutes just because I've been doing it so often. And by the way, my last point, if full disclosure, is you can cheat sometimes. So if I'm ever stuck, brain's not working, I just have writer's block, I can go back to an email that I sent back, 2016, 2018, 2020. I may have to tweak it a little bit, but I can put it back out there. And I've never had a subscriber say, hey, Mark, you sent this exact email back March 25th of 2017. You piece of garbage, I'm unsubscribing or whatever. So you can repackage content. So if you start doing daily emails today, future you will be thanking you now for doing that, because it's going to help you down the road.
Something important. You said that you could talk about email marketing for hours. Can you come back? If you'll come back,
yeah,
we can talk about email marketing exclusively.
I would love to. Yeah, just
Okay.
let me know day and time and we'll get it done.
I will email you as soon as we're done here. Well,
Sure.
listen, one last thing, because we are out of time. What is one piece of advice that you would give to aspiring coaches who are hesitant to start doing anything due to budget constraints?
Oh, Robin Sharma had an acronym in one of his books, KMF, keep moving forward. So I think that's really important, is just get in there. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. Just start with those small tasks. Compound effect, Darren Hardy wrote a book on that. Better to do the small daily things and get that momentum going, as opposed to what most people do is they have this mad rush of energy for a week or 2 weeks or a month. They're excited. Then if they don't get the results they want, suddenly they're depressed and they lose all their energy, and then bang, they're gone. Just like with podcasting, pod fading. I'm sure you've heard of Denise and stuff. A lot of shows are doing that. They're on, their show isn't dead, but it's not alive either. They just haven't put anything out in a few years. It's much better to start off small, just do the consistent actions and keep the momentum going. So KMF, keep moving forward.
Listen, my podcast is 16 years old. It's old
Oh,
enough to drive.
you're one of the OGs. Jeez, I thought I was a grizzled veteran, but yeah, 16 years, that's a lot.
16 years old. I keep saying I'm going to get it a driver's license and let it go.
Your podcast is the exact same age as my son turned 16 this summer, and he has his learner's permit. So he was probably just coming out of the womb. Could have been listening to your podcast in the hospital when he was coming out.
Oh, you never know. That would be funny. Listen, I've got to let you go before this thing cuts us off, and I do want you to come back. But to our audience, thank you for joining us on this episode of Your Partner in Success Radio. We had a really incredible discussion with Marc Mawhinney about starting a successful business on a shoestring budget using his 3-pillar strategy. And he's going to come back soon and talk about email marketing, which I'm fascinated with. I need to know more. And Marc shared invaluable insights on building your online coaching business without expensive ads. And he talked quite a bit about the power of daily emails and how to confidently charge what you're worth. And if you found this conversation as fascinating as I did, please take a moment to connect with Marc at naturalborncoaches.com. And I'll have him pop back in and tell us where to find his podcast, and join his community on Facebook for even more resources. And if you enjoyed our conversation as much as I did, I would greatly appreciate it if you could leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts Why? Because your feedback not only helps me improve, but it also allows us to reach more aspiring coaches and entrepreneurs like you. So thank you for listening, and I will see you next week. Mark, where can people find you again?
Well, you can find the podcast and everything at naturalborncoaches.com, and the Coaching Jungle group. If you go to thecoachingjungle.com, you'll get into the community.
Thank you. I have enjoyed this. I've got 4 pages of notes. Normally it's only about 2 pages, but I've got
Good
4
stuff.
pages. I know. And I can't wait to have you come back again. So thank you and have a wonderful day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Get your voice heard. If you would like to launch your own far-reaching podcast, contact Denise Griffitts at yourofficeontheweb.com and go to the podcast tab.